everyone, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Nancy Drew the Haunted Carousel. Chapter 8, Radio Gimmick. Nancy's eyes sparkled with interest. Can you explain it to someone who knows nothing about electrical engineering? Neil nodded. Sure, there's nothing very complicated about it. Do you know what a radio relay is? Not really, Nancy dimpled and shook her head. Okay, well, think of it as a kind of switch that turns something on and off, only you don't have to push it with your finger as you do with a light switch. Why not? Because it's a remote control switch that's operated by a radio signal. You need a person could be some distance away from the carousel and start it or stop it that way? Exactly. All you need is a radio transmitter to keep a signal of the right frequency. How far would he have to be? Nancy inquired keenly. Neil shrugged. Anywhere from a few feet to a few miles, or even farther, depending on how powerful a transmitter he used. And how big would the radio relay be? Very small. If it was attached to a magnet, it could be very clamped underneath the operator's control box and you'd never even notice it. Neil said the old-fashioned carousels, dating back before the turn of the century, worked by steam power, which was also used to pump the band organ that played the merry-go-round. But nowadays, carousels are run by electric motors, and the music comes from an electronic tape. The radio relay, he went, would have had two little wires with alligator clips on the end, so they could snap onto the wires coming out of the operator's control box. In other news, Nancy said, whoever played the trick will just have to stick the relay in place underneath the control box and then clip it onto two wires. Right, even a kid could do it in seconds, and to remove it, he'd just have to unsnap the wires and pull off the relay. Teenagers and adults occasionally rode the merry-go-round. Neil guessed that the prankster could deftly attach such a device without being noticed while customers were getting on and off the carousel between rides, and it could be removed just as easily the next day, or for that matter during the night after the carousel had performed its spooky routine. Is there any sort of clue that might tell us whether or not the radio relay was used the way you described? Nancy asked thoughtfully. Yes, I thought it wouldn't call it proof, Neil replied. Some of the insulated covering is worn away from the wires that come out of the control box. I know several scratch marks that might have been made by the alligator clips. Nancy thanked the engineering student for his help. Neil's theory gave her the exciting hope that she might now be one step closer to the solution of the haunted carousel mystery. Next morning after breakfast, she called the red-haired girl who had come to the house. The woman was answered by a short-voiced woman. May I speak to Joy Trent, please? Nancy asked politely. Joy's not here. Who's calling? Was the curt response. Somehow, the woman managed to sound bossy, impatient, and inquisitive all at the same time. My name's Nancy Drew. Joy left a message asking me to get in touch with her. What was your name again? Nancy Drew. All right, I'll tell you who to call, the woman said grudgingly and hung up. Nancy put down the phone with a wry smile. Whoever the woman was, her telephone manner was anything but gracious. Nancy was about to turn away into the living room when the phone rang. She picked up the receiver again. The caller was Ned Nickerson. I'm back from Emerson, he reported. How about lunch? Sounds wonderful, Nancy replied, her spirits instantly rising. Where should we meet? You name it. Well, let me see. I have to go to Riverside Park again. Say no more. I'll meet you there. 11:30 be okay? Perfect. After hanging up, Nancy told Hannah Gruen her plans for the day. Later that morning, she found a space for her blue sports car in the parking lot adjoining to the amusement ride area, and the strolls across the park toward the carousel. As she approached it, saw a woman talking to the merry-go-round owner, Leo Novak. The owner, about 40, was attractive and well-dressed. She was showing Novak a piece of paper that looked like a newspaper or magazine clipping. As she spoke, she gestured toward the carousel. Novak shrugged and shook his head in response. Nancy paused, not wanting to intrude on the conversation. The woman took a card and pen from her purse. She wrote something on the card, handed it to Novak, and then turned away. Nancy resumed her approach. By the time she was able to speak to Leo Novak, the woman was some distance away. Do you mind telling me who that lady was? Nancy asked the right owner. Oh, just some busybody who's wrote all about that hokum in the news about my haunted merry-go-round. Novak brushed off her query. Nancy noticed he was wearing a large eye patch. By the way, what's wrong with your eye? She inquired sympathetically. Nothing serious, I hope. Nothing seemed embarrassed by her question. Get a speck of it. Yeah, last night, that's all. This morning, it was still sore. It'll clear up. Perhaps you should go see a doctor, Mr. Novak, Nancy advised, and then she told him Neil Sawyer's theory of how the carousel might have been turned on and off by a radio relay device. Leo Novak, however, scoffed at the idea. No way, he retorted. You can take it away from me. You can take it from me. If any gimmick like that would have been planted under the control box, I notice it. Nancy was not convinced, but didn't wish to take time to argue. She was eager to find and interview the woman who had seen talking to the carousel operator. Nancy was intrigued by the way she had written something on a card and handed it to Novak as if asking him to get in touch with her later. But why would she do that, Nancy wondered, unless her interest in the merry-go-round was more serious or more important than Mr. Novak cared to admit? As she turned away, Nancy caught a fleeting glimpse of the skin under the edge of her eye patch. It seemed dark and swollen. Gee, I wonder if he got a black eye, she thought. If so, that might explain his look of embarrassment when she inquired why he was wearing the eye patch. Nancy hurried off, shading her eyes to scan the throng of people milling around the park. But the mystery woman was no longer in sight. After searching the amusement park for a while, she gave up with a sigh and glanced at her watch. It was almost 11:30. Uh-oh, Ned may be waiting for me, Nancy reminded herself. Sure enough, Ned was in the parking lot. He waved as he approached and got out of his car to greet her with a kiss. How about the Limehouse Tavern for lunch? Nancy smiled. Fine with me. I'd love some fish and chips. The tavern, not far off from Riverside Park, was run by an ex-London cockney and his wife. Nancy and Ned both loved its nautical atmosphere, remnants of an English dockside pub, and always found the food delicious. As they ate, Nancy said, Did you get your fall program straightened out? Yeah, no problem, which reminds me, do you remember Professor Jenner? Of course, you remind him at the May Day ball. Teaches art history, doesn't he? That's the guy, Ned nodded. He wants me to ask you a favor. Ever heard of an artist named Walter Cruz? The Western painter and sculptor? Right. In fact, he started out as a cowboy, I hear. Anyway, the prof was writing a book about Cruz, and he almost caught a news report about you tackling the mystery of that haunted carousel. Nancy was amused and slightly bewildered. I'm not sure I see the connection, she said with a chuckle. There was one, believe it or not. It seemed the news broadcast showed the carousel, including its name, the Wonderland Gallop. And according to Professor Jenner, Walter Cruz once had a girlfriend whose father owned the carousel. Nancy was surprised and charmed by this bit of information. She remembered reading that the artist had passed away a year or two ago. From her impression of Cruz's age, she guessed that Professor Jenner must be referring to the Wonderland Gallop's original owner, the man who Leo Novak had once worked for. Ned related that the romance had occurred during a brief period when Walter Cruz was employed as an amusement park roustabout. Soon afterward, the artist had gone to New York and his work had become famous, but for a while he had kept up a correspondence with the carousel owner's daughter in which he expressed the thoughts about painting and sculpture. That's what Cruz once told the prof, anyhow, Ned concluded, so now that he's writing a book about him, Professor Jenner would like to see those letters if the owner's daughter still has them, and he's hoping that you can help him get in touch with her. I'll be glad to try, Nancy promised. Since Ned had to work that afternoon, he drove Nancy back to Riverside Park, where she had left her car. I may as well ask Mr. Novak right now about the owner's daughter, Nancy reflected. So she strolled through the parking lot toward the amusement ride area. Oh, Miss Drew, called a youthful voice. Nancy turned and saw a pretty teenage girl with flaming red hair waving at her. The girl was hastily getting rid of a sleek, powerful-looking sports car. Nancy guessed at once that she must be Jory Trent, and suddenly she also realized why Hannah's description of the red-headed visitor sounded familiar. This was the girl who had waved for her yesterday when she was chasing Fingers Malone towards the haunted house. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.